Hey guys, Jeremy, BleepinJeep. Matt's still out of town, working on his rig, making some battery cables. Went and got a bunch of lugs. You can always use copper pipe if you want to, you're in a pinch or something like that. You can make your own little lug, drill your hole, flatten it out, all that old jazz. I went and got lugs because that's how I prefer to do it. Just simpler, easier. And but anyway, side effect. So we're gonna put some lugs on some wires today. We got some heat shrink and we got red and black. So we put them on both. You can see the quality and the difference in the cheap black and the quality red. Now the only issue is when I got this today, I forgot that this cable was a 1/0 cable. So I got here and whoop, doesn't fit. So I had to get a little bit bigger heat shrink. It's no big deal because since we're doing lugs, once it's on, get the right heat shrink, it just slides right over the lug anyway. So that's no big deal, we can easily add it later. The copper lugs have this little flare on the end of them. Works really good when you're not doing heat shrink and stuff like that. You strip it back, butt it up, you can see how it fits the wire really tightly. So you get on there, you put it down, and you smash it on there or whatever you're gonna do. I like to solder. So today we're gonna solder, we're gonna coat everything with a good coating of flux. And then we're going to use the solder and we're going to solder it on there. Shove them together, have a nice soldered connection because that's the best connection. It's the cleanest connection. Now, the only issue with these kind that have the nice little flare on them, it's designed to butt up to the rubber, but when you put the heat shrink over them, you see that little bubble. Kind of doesn't look as pretty. So what we're going to do today is we're going to just grind that little flare off right there. That way, when it's all heat shrunk, it'll be nice and clean and pretty, like this one. See how it doesn't have it? Now I got these two heavy duty lugs for the battery, and then all the other ones are going to the distribution block and the switches and stuff like that. So, but we got these and it goes right on there and it'll look like that. Then you take your heat tape and go over top. So I didn't notice that Matt had a video of this, so figured while I was doing it, might as well make a video. This is my first time doing filming without Matt. Normally he's the production camera guy. So he's not here, so I figured I'd give it a whirl. I don't know. So don't be too harsh on me because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm just messing around, building his stuff. Figured I'd turn the camera on while I was here. Well, let's get started. Okay, so right here you can see the flare on this side and how this one doesn't have it. If you weren't going to use heat shrink, you just use this one and butt it up to there and maybe put some electric tape if you want to, either way. But that's the difference in the two. Uh-oh, lost focus. Look what I found. I went over to get a screw for the flux and Matt had more heat shrink. These are big enough to go on the wire and everything. So look at that. That's good. So like I said, I ground that off. The lip's going on there. So it's no big deal. Now the first thing we need to do is strip this back roughly the right depth. So kind of hold it up there, get you an idea of where it is. And I use a razor knife, and traditionally I don't just use a blade, but we're in Matt's garage and it may take me 5 minutes to find the razor knife. So we're just going to wing it with this right here. So be careful if you do dumb stuff like I'm doing right now. So there we go. Get all the little paper if there's any paper on there. So before we heat anything, we want to make sure we do a slight test fit, if you know what I mean, to make sure that this is all going to fit in there. A little piece of paper right there is being a booger right there, wasn't it? All right, now we're good. So you see how it's frayed. It's going all different directions. I can't say twist it exactly, but you need to get it all super tight the best you can and do a test fit. So because these guys fit like exactly, and once this thing's hot, it ain't gonna want to go together real good. And you can see here how it's sticking over. Well, you need to take your time and get this worked right down the best you can. Maybe you take a nice set of cutters and try to clean cut it, or you could probably even take a cutoff wheel and a grinder and clean cut this before I stripped it. As you can see, wherever this came from, they kind of butchered the end of it. It looks like a little mound. So, but we'll see if we can get in there. But you want to try to test fit this prior. There we go. See that? You're going to have a couple of these little stragglers. Don't worry about them. That's just going to happen. There's a million of these little wires in there, so you're just going to snip those all off when it's done anyway. So, but you test fit it, work it around, try to get it right where it needs to be, and hopefully, if you're lucky enough, it'll stay that way after you solder. So, comes to soldering. Take your solder. I'll wad this up a lot of times, put me a little blank in there instead of having to feel it. You know, just keep folding it over like this and make me a little blank, because it is solder and it just melts. Then you stick that in there, and I'll do that a couple times and make me a little lug, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing it on the vehicle, which is a lot more difficult, I'll definitely make a lug and cram it in there, because I'll hold this with a pair of vice grips, like you were doing it like this right here. And then I have my wire off my vehicle, and I'd have the torch sitting nearby, and I'd hold that over the torch. You may not see that in the camera. I'd hold this over the torch because it'd be nearby, and then I would bring it back to the vehicle and stab my wire in and hold it until it cooled down. So that's what we're gonna do. That's how you do it on a vehicle, I mean. So you make your little lug like that, squeeze it down enough to get it in there, and boom, voila. Somebody corrected me on an earlier video that I was doing with Matt, and I said voila with a W, and they said it's voila. I think it could be voila, and I'm saying voila. I don't know. Tomato, tomato. Who cares? But either way, heat that up and do that. So this stuff is an acid core, and I think it already has some flux in it, but I'm going to put more flux on it here. So get a little bit of flux. Put in that right there. It's going to make sure the inside of that's good and clean. The flux is the key, in my opinion, to any soldering. If you take two wires and put them together, and a lot of you guys have soldered before, and you're trying to get that solder to go and solder to go and solder to go, and it just keeps beating up like a ball of mercury on there. It's because your copper's not clean. You need to take you some flux like such, and flux like such. That sounds weird, doesn't it? So put it on there, get some, and then what you'll do is you'll literally heat this wire up, and even brand new copper will get so much shinier. It'll get so shiny when you go to heat this up and stick it in there. But it just shows you how much cleaner it'll get after you do that. So let's give it a whirl here. See if you can see it on camera. You see it melts instantaneously. Even if you're using a soldering iron, it'll melt instantaneously. I say instantaneous, as soon as it gets hot enough to melt. But you just get that all hot, and it just literally boils anything off the copper, and that copper is just so shiny afterwards. You'll notice that a lot when you're using any kind of dirty kind of copper. You'll really notice it immediately. So, but anyway, good clean, and now the solder would stick right to that. So now we'll heat this up, and we'll fill this up and see how much solder. You want to get it up quite a bit of solder, so when you put this on, the solder runs out. So if you do it perfectly, no solder runs out. It just goes right up to the edge. You may have to do this once or twice. The good part is if you stick this in and you realize the solder isn't up enough, just keep heating it and you'll pull it right back out. More solder, stick it back down in there. You want that solder to come right up to the edge when you stick this down in there. You want that rubber to meet that in there pretty good, like so. And you want to see that solder right there. So, you know, sometimes they're better than others. We're going to give this a whirl and see how it works out. Got quite a bit of solder in there. So, alright, so we're going to heat this up and get them both pretty warm there. We'll see how lucky we are. See if we can get it on the first go here. So, So you line it up. You ain't got to worry about being too fast. You want to make sure you line it up best you can. Because once you get it all in there and it's ready, best you can. I said, don't worry about some scragglers. You see how far down that went? You ain't got to worry about that. Solder's already hardened in there. So now what we'll do is we'll reheat this. And you'll see it slide right down in there in a second. Hopefully we have the right amount of solder in there. So we need some more solder. You can see it didn't fill up completely like I was talking about. So that's just the name of the game. So heat it up, but most of the solder's in the wire. It's not the cavity you're trying to fill as well. When you start shoving solder in there, it wicks up into that wire. So a lot of what you're doing is filling this with solder as well. So this time it'll go back together real easy because there's solder all over that. So like so. So you see the solder? I don't know if y'all can. It's like right there. That's what you're going for. Hold it, let it cure. If you start yanking on it too soon, it'll most definitely come out of there. So, like I said, the solder, not only you're filling that cavity, the solder goes up in the wire a little bit because it's got like a capillary reaction or attraction, I guess, and it's going to pull up in there like it would if you were doing a plumbing connection. You ever thought about that? They take a female end and a male end, put it there, and all they do is put solder right here, but it solders the whole joint because the solder pulls into that joint. That's what happens here. The solder pulls in there, and so it uses more than you think, but it's easy to take your time and go about it and do that. So let's see if we can show you here. See how the copper's all the way up right there? Now that's a solid connection all the way through, and the way this thing is crimped and bent, there's these voids in here, you know, all that's full of solder now. This whole thing's full of solder, even this wire up here. So we got a great connection. I mean, they just stamp these right here, you know, it's got a little stamp across through there where they just hammer that down on a press and punch a hole in it, you know. So we've just filled any of those voids with solder all the way up in here and this wire up through here. So now this wire's hot. It's hot all the way back to here where my hand's at. Like I was having trouble holding it right here. It's so hot right here. So here I'll let it cool off, and then I'll take the heat shrink, shove it over that, and we'll have a nice soldered in. Now, some of you are like, well, I don't want to run a battery terminal like a tractor, a marine terminal, you know, has a bolt coming up and this goes on there, has a big wing nut. Well, on off-road rigs, that's what we traditionally run because it's easy to add accessories off of those and different things like that, as well as you may have problems one day and you need to take your battery cover off and you don't have a 1/2-inch wrench, and you can reach up real quick and grab this and twist it and knock that wing nut loose and take it off and stuff like that. So again, we use these most commonly in what we're doing in the off-road, but you can get these from a high-quality auto parts store. You may not be able to get them from your local Advanced AutoZone, but Napa, some good places like that will have it. You can get your whole battery terminal that's already got a hole. It's like this right here. It doesn't bolt on. The bolt-on ones they're kind of in a pinch, or you just don't have any kind of skill to solder something on, in my opinion. But the bolt-on ones go right here. Well, man, eventually they're going to loosen up and fall apart and that whole deal. And everybody that's ever done those will know exactly what I'm talking about. You can walk up to those things after you bolted them on and wiggle it, and you'll see the wire moving in there. You just don't have a good connection right there. And you'll go out one day and try to start your stuff and it won't start again. You know, like in one day it'll start, next day it won't. You go out and wiggle your cable and all of a sudden it starts. You know, that's not a good connection. And if you're trying to run something like that through your winch or something like that, you're going to melt the whole connection off. You got to have such a positive connection, or if one day you're out there trying to start your rig for whatever reason, or your car or anything, and you know, if it doesn't have a great connection, it'll get hot and melt down. You know, the terminals on the battery are lead, you know, it'll just melt those right off. So you got to make sure you got good connections. And this is how I do. I never use a bolt-on connection. I mean, I don't care, because these torches are mobile, and you go get these and the little wing nut style battery terminals, boom. Now you go down to local parts store, said you can get the positive and negative terminals that look just like this. You can even get them with the solder already in them. You can get them, they'll sell those solder lugs beside them, so you can buy solder lugs and put them in yourself. Whatever, you can use the solder just like I did. Doesn't matter how you do it, but this is by far the best way to go about doing it. And then when we get done, we'll put this heat shrink about right here, and it'll hide any of this ugly for one, and for two, it'll just look great. And this terminal right here, it won't fail. I mean, if you look back at your winch, most of you have winches, you're pulling almost 400 amps on your winch. Your motor doesn't pull near that. See, that's cooled off already, so that's good. And no one's ever melted one of these coppered lugs off of their winch, you know, so you just think about the positive connection that comes with those. And a lot of them are done just like this, the same way, but put that on and we'll slide that right on across, and we'll get that all lined up like so. And we'll just keep pushing and working that across. So we get to there like so. If you have trouble getting it on, you can always cut it a little bit shorter if you want to. But this is what we're after right here. So this may be a little lengthy, me jawing, but show you guys how this is the best way to go about doing it. So, which I do recommend using a high quality heat shrink. This is not necessarily the most high quality in a sense, but that's it. So that looks pretty good. You can see here when I was pushing that on, I actually pushed the rubber back on the wire. I was pushing so hard, but that's fine. It ain't hurting anything. So, but again, that's a good heat shrink soldered connection that'll last, in my opinion, a lifetime of whatever you're putting it on. Because if your terminal corrodes or messed up or whatever, these right here don't ever mess up. You know, you just maybe put a new terminal on it, but this will last forever. So hopefully somebody got something out of that. That's my opinion. The reason we're going through all this trouble is you can see this connection right here where the heat shrink or tape, however you would have it done, but in this case it's a heat shrink, has failed, and the cables are hanging out and the wire is just wiggling like this. So as vibrations go and it goes like that, all those little fine strands start to crack and break and crack and break, and then next thing you know, you've only, after a couple years of that, you've only got about a half of your cable making connection anymore. So that's why we're going through all the trouble to make sure all this is soldered, because I told you the solder wicks up into this wire, and I'll show you real quick out back how firm the connection is and how much more stable it is, so this doesn't happen in the future. So this is the one we soldered on and heat shrink on right here. Now watch how the solder goes up here so far that when this bends, you see how it doesn't bend down here? It's protected. All that solder has protected this whole thing right here, so it gradually wicks up in there. So your cable bends, but it doesn't bend right here at the end because it's filled with solder, and then it just gradually works it into a bend. So right here is your most of your bending down here. So when you solder it on, it's just a lot stronger and longer lasting connection. All right guys, let's wrap this up. This is my first time doing a video. Tell me what you think. Matt's not here. He's always the producer telling me exactly what I need to do, and or ideas how to do it or whatever, and I just sit back and laugh and have a good time and talk to him mainly as much as the camera. But this is the first time I've done anything like this. For all I know, he's already got this exact video. I couldn't find it online. When I thought about it, I Googled it. So I couldn't find it online, and so maybe he hadn't done it. So I don't know. So Tim did a similar video, but Matt that I couldn't find. So either way, I figured since I was doing it, might as well do the video, play around. So here we are. But again, this is my opinion of the best way to fix your terminals on your car. Go get you the positive or negative terminal that's already got the hole in it like I talked about. You can get the pre-measured solder lugs. You know, they'll have the slug for it, and you just drop it in there. It's pre-measured. You don't have to guess. You know, you do that and heat it up and boom, put it right together. And you fixed that thing for a really long time, in my opinion. If you do it the way we do it on our rigs with the lugs and the marine terminals, I think they're called marine terminals, but you put those on there and it has the wing nut. That to me is just the best way. You know, if you ever have a problem with the terminal, it cracks or the bolt messes up or nothing, you know, you just take it out, throw it away. You still got the lug, you know, that you soldered on, put it back on there. I think that's just the best way. You can also get these terminals that come in a T, so you can run a wire in and a wire out of your battery. So you can have 2 battery cables, you know. You know, there's all kinds of options on this stuff when you start looking, you know. But like always, Matt says, hit the like button if you haven't already, subscribe, hit the bell, and if you're a fan of the page, go to Patreon. Thanks, guys.